Welcome to Podcetera. Each episode is a journey of discovery as we delve into topics that pique our curiosity and yours. We feature in-depth interviews with fascinating individuals who have extraordinary stories to share.
I'm Renee Lego.
And I'm Joelle Ludovich. And this
is Podcetera. Lincoln, welcome to Podcetera. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
You are currently a writer and also president and CEO of Sandfire Resources America. You've spent over 3 decades in finance, and many of them as a finance executive and CFO. You currently live in Canada, but were born and raised in St. Lucia. So I'd like to start the interview there. Could you tell us about your family and what it was like growing up there? And for those who don't know St. Lucia, tell us about the island and its people.
Well, thank you very much. I'll try and be as brief as possible because it's a long one. So I'll talk about St. Lucia and then I'll go to my family. St. Lucia Island, yes, in the Caribbean. England and France fought over the country or the island 14 times before England finally won. And it's called the Helen of the West Indies for that reason. It's also just beautiful, like many places in the world, but I'm biased when I talk about my place of my birth. We are the only island in the Caribbean to have 2 Nobel laureates. So that's also interesting. We have the only driving volcano in the world called Sulphur or Sulphur Springs. It's in Sulphur, but it's called Sulphur Springs. And that's also a beautiful thing to visit if you ever visit St. Lucia. Growing up, my dad was a local preacher in the Methodist Church. He also had his own Sunday show. My mother was a banker for over 25 years. My dad was also the president at one time of the largest union in St. Lucia, as well as just a humanitarian. And he was also an entrepreneur. He had electronics and, a gift store. So growing up was fun because he was, I would say, one of the funniest people I've ever met. And I've ever known, and still to this day, he was funny, very funny. His jokes and the way he said them, just even legendary, certainly in St. Lucia among his friends and family. To this day, you could see that I miss him dearly. So growing up in St. Lucia was fun. I went to Pasofino Comprehensive High School. Before that, I went to a Methodist school, both infant and primary school. And then after high school, I joined NCB, which is National Commercial Bank. The name has changed since then, but it was the National Bank. And in 3 years that I worked there, I was promoted 3 times. I got a good grounding from my manager, Brian John, who instilled some discipline and curiosity to learn that I still follow to this day. So that was one of the starting points, really, for me. So that's, my growing up in St. Lucia was, as I said, lots of fun. I was also an athlete, and that was fun. I was a high jump champion at comprehensive school for 4 years in a row. And that was one of the highlights, was great in school, very good student, which set me up in good stead when I migrated to Canada.
Could you talk a little bit about your journey to Canada and how your family ended up there?
Well, interestingly enough, I was the only one who actually migrated. My parents and my 2 sisters, they remain. Well, actually, one of my sisters, my younger sister, had already gone. She had left home. She traveled quite a bit, went to La Sorbonne in France University, and she spent about 1 year or 2 years in Denmark and now lives in Miami. But my transition to Canada, it seemed like a natural one. I had 2 aunts or 3 aunts, I guess, maybe more than that. Certainly I had relatives in Ottawa, Canada. So that's where I migrated to. Funny enough, someone coming from St. Lucia migrating to Canada, which is very cold. Well, in comparison to St. Lucia, obviously, which has no winter. So that was a bit of an adjustment. But I'm one of these people who, that's small. That's very insignificant, in my opinion. If everyone else, 35 million people can do it, certainly one person like myself could. So that was my mindset. And My mother wanted me to further my studies. And as a teenager, I didn't have a choice necessarily, but it's all turned out very well. But the transition was pretty smooth. I lived with my aunt for the first 2 years, and then I moved to stay with a family friend, and after that on my own. And it's been an interesting journey since then.
Could you share the backstory or that moment that led you to create the book, No More Excuses?
Well, the backstory really is that I have, and I'm sure everyone can relate to it, whether, it's myself or my friends, my family, acquaintances. I find that many have always made excuses for not doing what they need to do. I speak to people regularly and ask them, oh, how is it going with whatever you talked about 3 years ago or longer? And then they always have an excuse. Well, it wasn't time, this happened. And the catalyst for me, really, to answer your question, was I had to look within, because part of the journey that I started to go on a few years ago, certainly after my dad had passed, and well, it took me about 5 years after he passed for me to step back and ask myself, what am I doing? Am I making the same excuses that I hear other people make? Because I always thought when they make these excuses, I'm like, that's just an excuse. If you wanted to do it, you could do it. So that was it for me. It was very simple. If I had to think that way about others, I had to look within and realize, So the book really was even more a lesson for myself. My daughter says that when she does exams, she likes to write things down and then read it. And then it sort of helps her write exams. For me, that's not the same, but the book is that way. It wasn't just writing for others. It was writing to sort of validate and confirm my own view and what I need to do in my life. And that's what I'm doing right now, is not making excuses, just doing what I need to do. Because we all can. And trust me on it. When you find that you no longer make excuses, it's liberating.
When I met you, you were heading to a funeral.
Oh, yeah.
But you wouldn't know that you were heading to a funeral because you are a positive, upbeat person. But you've experienced a lot of tragedy and pain in your life.
Yes.
You've had a child with cancer of the eye, later diagnosed with autism. We can talk about that. And you recently lost your wife, which I'm sorry to hear about.
Thank you.
But from where I stand and what little I know about you, you don't seem to wear that pain on your sleeve, but you don't hide it either. Your positivity is super inspiring to me, and that resonated when I met you.
Thank you.
So as the saying goes, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger.
It does.
What lessons has this tragedy or the pain on your sleeve?
At the bottom of my emails, I have this saying, I grumbled when I had no shoes until I met a man with no feet. My cousin Jenny told me that's one of the things that her dad told her. After her husband had died, she recalled that her father used to tell her that when she was much younger. And it resonated with me because everyone has a story. Everyone has a challenge in one way or the other. You may think not, right? And you may always think that your story, your challenges are the worst and no one has it bad. But this saying really says there's always someone that has it worse, number one. Or just generally, it can be worse. And even with my son having cancer, my wife just passing, I thought, why me? And then I have to check myself and realize, what do you mean, why you? It could be worse. I don't want to say, how could it be? Think about it. It could be. Anything that happens to you in life really could be worse. And that has been sort of the way that I have lived my life, is recognizing that even though there's pain and there's challenges, and I recognize the challenges are there, and you can see it in my expression. I'm not excited about those pain points that happen in my life, but I also realize that it's important to live. And that is what sustains me. So on my sleeve really is the fact that I miss my wife. I know that my children miss their mother. I'm saddened by the fact that my son had to have cancer. His left eye had to be inoculated, so he only has one eye. I'm saddened that he has autism, but I'm excited and happy that he lives. I'm excited and happy that we actually did have Yasmin, my wife, their mother, for a period of time to enjoy her you know. So it's all about mindset and perspective. You either cry and be disappointed on what may have been, or you are excited and happy and thankful for what was and what will be. It's just mindset, right? And finally, even the saying that I mentioned, but it's the serenity prayer. Whether you believe in God or not, if you step back and you say, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference. And as I said, when you think about it, there's no sense spending a lot of time mulling over things that you cannot change. The thing is to accept the things you cannot, to change the things you can. So if you know you can, do it, no more excuses. And more importantly, the most important really in all of it is knowing the difference between what you can change and what you cannot change. And when you know that my wife has passed, there's no way I can bring her back. I'm going to therapy now. And one of the things that the lady asked me is, what would my wife want me to do? How would she want me to feel and operate and live? In sadness, depression, or with a living testimony of how great life can be and how short it can be, so that we can live in the moment and not wait and make excuses and delay the things that we need to do in life. That is ultimately what's on my sleeve and what keeps me humble and excited, even if I am currently in grief and it's rough. It's very rough. But it's no sense bringing you two down or anyone else down with me in that pain. Because again, what would my wife and those who have passed on, my dad who passed away, how he would want us to live our life? And to me, it's with an excitement of remembering that they lived as long or short a life that they lived it. And we were glad to have been in their lives and they in ours. So that's it.
Late last year, in my orbit, I had 6 people pass away in the span of 2 months. And one of my friends, her partner, 10 years, weren't married, but they were as close to married as you could be. And suddenly he passed away. And almost every day I see her posting on Facebook. A memory will come up with him. So every day she posts, and she posted something yesterday that struck me. She said, I'm sorry if I'm vocalizing my grief too much and you guys don't want to hear it. And my response to her was, be as loud and as long in your grief as you need.
Yes.
Because everyone has their own journey. So I say the same thing to you. Be as loud and long in your grief the rest of your life,
Yeah, that's spot on. The thing for me is that I just want to make sure my grief does not impact my self negatively or others. That's the key. Because it's okay to grieve, but it's not okay to remain in grief such that you go into depression, because that happens. There's stages of grief and you need to come out of it better. Because if you don't come out of it better, I'm sure the two of you have met people who have deteriorated to their own demise as a result. And that's not good for myself, not good for us having this conversation. It's not good for my children. You were spot on that we all grieve differently. We all grieve. There is no timeline. And I think personally, if I were to stop grieving, I think that would be a problem. The question is, how do I grieve? But I will always miss her. I will always grieve for the ones that have passed, at least for me. But it will get better in terms of how I am able to live in that grief. And yes, you're right. So thank you. I appreciate your comments, because it means a lot to me when you say that listen, as loud as you want, as you need, because everyone is different. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate that.
How can people or we strike a balance between honoring feelings of grief and embracing positivity?
Well, here's my view. because I always think that there's no one answer or one correct answer. So my perspective is that you have to first have a joy in your heart. If you don't have the joy in your heart, everything else that happens externally will impact you in a way that may not be necessarily the best for you and for others around you. And what I mean by joy is that when you recognize that, okay, you know what, there's life. Let me step back. I think it was Charles, maybe you guys will correct me, but it was one of those authors or writers who said that the two most important dates of someone's life is one, when they were born, and two, when they found out why. Now, understanding that, I think, is the key. Because when you in your soul recognize that, you know, how perfectly made that you are, and that there's a joy in your heart that comes from within and not external, then you're able to strike the balance when, even in grief, when something external happens, like a loved one passes away or gets into a bad accident or leaves or whatever it is that to you, because remember, it's how it impacts you. Because even some people pass away and others don't feel the same, right? It's not the situation, it's how that situation impacts you. And to me, it impacts you the way you want or you need it to impact you based on how you see life. And if you see life as, well, death is a part of life, then it impacts you a little less. If you see death as the worst thing that could happen on the planet, then it will impact you different. If you see that you'll have to live a purpose life and life will go on, then it'll impact you different. So I think the balance really has to be, number one, you have a joy in your heart that comes from within and not from external stimuli. Two, that you live in a life of purpose so that any distractions, even someone passing, is a distraction, and you have to just accept the fact that these things will happen. I didn't think for 1 minute that my wife would have, I thought she would outlive me. So every now and then these things happen, and I don't think that's the reason why they happen, but every time when these, you know, challenges and tragedies happen, it's a reminder to you how to live, and to live with purpose, and to live and not delay. Because the balance hits you and, oh shoot, you know what, man, I really need to. Haven't you seen and heard people say, you know, this reminds me really that life is short? And then what happens? A month, maybe weeks, or a year goes by, and then you just go back to doing the things the way that you've always done it. And you need to be reminded every now and then, oh, you know what, life is short. Because Renee just mentioned 6 in 2 months, or 6 people passing. That hits you hard. But the balance is really understanding that you are still alive. So the question is, what are you going to do? What am I going to do? How are we going to live?
It's a gut check
Yes,
when someone passes, right?
that's it. It's a gotcha.
Another friend's husband, they had just decided, we're going to leave Texas. We're going to start a new life in Oregon, and sold everything. And they were retired. And this was a time for them to be together. And so they start shopping. They go to different areas of Oregon, and they go on a hike. He turns to her and he said, I don't feel so well. And he drops down and has a widowmaker heart attack.
You're kidding me.
Oh,
There you go.
wow.
Right?
And so I looked at my husband and I said, that's it. You know those plans that we said we were going to do?
Exactly.
We need to do them now.
I'm telling you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's no joke. It's no joke. And I'm telling you, if there's one thing I can tell you that is real, is exactly what you just said, Renee, what you just said. You know, my wife and I, 2 days before she died, we spoke about all the things that we would do. We were going to do, I was going to move, we're going to travel more, we're going to do this, downside. Oh, yeah. And then she passed. Could we have done it earlier? Absolutely. Right? But we waited. You know, I wanted to do this project. I'm just saying, time and time again, we see it, but we think it's never going to be us.
In your book dedication, you seem particularly influenced by your father. Tell us about your father and his impact on how you see the world.
My second book is going to be called Think. And one of the things that my dad, even though he was a lay preacher in the Methodist Church, And I said that in my book. He was more spiritual than religious. He lived a life of purpose. And I saw how happy he was, even with nothing, right? There's no better. I mean, have you ever seen people with nothing and they're just happy? And some people with everything and they seem happy, but they're not. And a lot of them, when you talk to them, you realize, oh, so my dad was a good influence on me to recognize that it's important to live a life of purpose and ensure that your life purpose is a part of service to others. It's not all about me, right? And that has been a great influence to me throughout the years, even as a husband, as a father, as a friend. It has been extremely inspirational. The fact that he could laugh about anything and everything, he could be loving and giving of himself every time, even to a fault. But it didn't matter because he didn't do things for fame. He did it because he was meant to live that life of service, which I think everyone was meant to do that, but they just don't necessarily, unfortunately. We would live in a much better world if people I wouldn't say less judgmental, because I mean, if someone does harm, like, serial killers and so forth, I'm not going to say, yeah, they're serial killer, right? I'm not going to say, oh, well, let's not judge. But you know what I mean? So I take things literally. So he was one who at least acknowledged that there was a human being, that actions had consequences, but still there was a human being. And if the person was in need of help, he would. And it's a tough thing to do, especially if but he would say, oh, this guy is no good. And then the next day, the guy would need help and he would be helping them. And I was like, well, I don't understand. I don't get it. But I do now. I do now. He was a good inspiration to me as I progress. And of course, dedication to my dad. My other book, Think, my dedication is going to be to one person and one person only, which is my wife, as she's passed. But my wife still remains the greatest inspiration in my life.
The central theme of your book revolves around the idea of confronting excuses that prevent people from living a life of purpose. Can you elaborate on why you believe excuses have no validity and are rooted in fear and doubt?
If you think about it, just ask yourself and listen to yourself, because most people don't listen to themselves. They speak, but they don't listen. Because if you listen to yourself, you'd realize that, yeah, the only reason why you're not doing what you would love to do is because of fear and doubt. Look at most successful people. They take a risk. And those risks, obviously, there's fear, there's doubt, but they manage it. Every time someone does something, there's a bit of fear and doubt, but you do it in spite of. That is the key. And that's what I've seen time and time again, even in my life. Have you ever done something weeks, months, years after, and when you do it, you're like, man, I wish I had done this earlier, because you had fear and doubt. And when you do it, you're like, man, what was I doubtful about? You may not say that to yourself, but you almost kick yourself. And that's the case in many situations. Sometimes you need to pause, but doing it over and over again, that's the problem. Making an excuse over and over again. Listen, you can make an excuse for today and tomorrow, but making an excuse every day, every week, every hour, every month, for years upon years, no, that does no good, because then you have to ask yourself, how are you doing? How's it working out for you? And when you ask yourself, listen, people might think that's crazy, but I say, the person in the mirror, yeah, have a chat to that person. But most people don't want to, because you really know deep down inside what the answer is. You really know. You just don't want to accept it. We don't want to accept the real truth. And the real truth is that fear and doubt is causing us not to live that life of purpose with meaning, that life that will never look back, ever, once you release that fear and doubt, or you manage it appropriately. Because again, as I said, there's always fear and doubt. I'm not saying that in life you will never have it. The question is, are you going to have that fear and doubt stop you from stepping into your truth, And people say, well, I can't make money doing this. I'm like, trust me, you can be successful in doing anything that you are passionate about if you put your mind to it. A lot of people actually said, garbage. Why would I want to be a garbage, speaking of the garbage? Well, look at the companies that do recycling and they make billions of dollars. You know why? Nobody else wanted to do it. And then someone said, you know what? I'm good at this. I'll do it. Last time I checked, let's see how life is if no one picks up your garbage. On the weekly basis, see how that works. I'm just putting it out there.
Right.
But, just ask yourself these questions. That's why my book has a chapter on that very topic, my second book, because people don't think about it. But yeah, why don't you just try it out? Yeah, I'm telling you, it's not going to be fun.
You mentioned the fear of failure, nonconformity, and societal pressures as drivers behind excuses. How do you suggest people overcome these fears?
Well, number one is you have to acknowledge that many of us are like sheep. Let me explain what that means. We conform, right? And the day that you realize that conformity does nothing other than keep you in a warm embrace, but it's masked by inaction, you have to realize today that you are not a sheep. You shouldn't act like a sheep, and that you are unique. I mean, when I say unique in every way, that's the beauty of each one of us. We are unique in every way possible. My wife was a twin, and even though she's a twin, it was a twin, they're still different, unique in many ways. Yes, there's similarities, more similarities than others, but they're still unique, different. That is the first thing that one needs to actually acknowledge, that we are like sheep. And if you don't believe that, just talk to yourself and ask yourself, what are your ideas on religion, politics, all these things that have people going in one direction because someone else has driven them to say this or think that way. Once you start to realize that, oh, you know what, maybe I should ask myself, why do I believe the things that I believe? Then you start getting to the point where you can now step into your truth. You can now no longer have the fear and doubt and societal norms and pressures and no more, because you realize of your own uniqueness and that you have a say that's yours and yours only, and not driven by what other people say or think or what they tell you how to think or how to behave. But you have to believe that's the case. If you do not believe that's the case, then you'll always remain in that vicious circle. That's my view. It all starts from within. Let's put it this way. It all starts from within. You acknowledging these things is important. You know what Alcoholics Anonymous, what do they say? The first step is admitting you have a problem. Well, with life and with excuses, the first is admitting that you are making excuses and that you are making excuses for a specific reason, because of fear, because of doubt, because of conformity to social norms. You have to, if you don't get there, then you could forget it. That's the baseline.
Your book highlights the relationship between belief in oneself, setting goals, and embracing the power of the mind. So how do these contribute to breaking free from excuses and pursuing your purpose?
The very fact that you acknowledge that you are unique is that you're using your mind. You have to recognize that you have a mind, you have a brain, you have intellect, that's the power to choose. That is the key. And so I'm glad you asked that question, because what I said before could not happen if you didn't realize that of your own intellect. Have you ever listened to doctors? Over the years, I've listened to many doctors. This is good for you? Oh, no. 10 years from now, we said this was good? No, this is bad. You have to listen to yourself and ask, okay, you know what?
Mm-hmm.
Something's not right. But you have to ask yourself. If you never ask yourself, how do you ask yourself? Use your mind. You were given a mind to use, and many people don't. And I'll tell you what, when you believe in social norms, listen, there's nothing wrong with social norms. I mean, we all participate in a society. But you have to ask yourself, why? And your mind is strong enough, effective enough to actually give you the answers that you desire. Seriously, it's amazing. And people don't realize that. And unfortunately, we have a school system that doesn't really help because it dumbs people down to a level of average, right? But when you realize, wow, you know what? I am unique and I learn differently and I can do amazing things. You can then go into the next step, which is to acknowledge, oh, then I don't have to just accept things for what people tell me they are. I can then, for my own self, with my own mind, with reading, understanding, talking to people, recognize what your real truth is. Because you know what? That's the beauty. When you start that, oh, it's amazing. But I'll tell you what, it's not easy because just growing up in the church and so forth, it's a bit tough for a lot of people to accept that you can and you have a mind of your own and you can think for yourself and your belief system cannot be what someone tells you. It can be your belief, you, not the belief has been passed on. And telling you, it's a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful thing when you realize, oh man, you've been brainwashed, or you realize that people who have been telling you things are just human. Don't blame them because blame is of no significance to anybody, just so you know. You should never blame yourself or anyone else. Recognize that they're human. They have feelings, they themselves, they have a mind also, not utilized in the most effective way. And over time, you'll realize that they too didn't know. And maybe they just passed on to you the things that they were told and they were like sheep. And so that's my long way of saying that the mind, I think it was Lou Roll for the NAACP, I think, or I can't remember which one it is. The mind is a terrible thing to waste. It is a terrible thing to waste because when you use your mind, it opens you up to a lot of possibilities and understanding, oh, you know what, how sad it is. And listen, even as parents too, we teach our children certain things that our parents taught us. And if you only listen to your children sometimes, you realize, oh my shit, yeah, they're right. I have a belief or a thinking of something that I think that has to be done. And I have no idea why. Now you can get into recognizing, okay, you know what? I'm unique. I'm great. The mind is a beautiful thing. I should allow my children to actually use their mind as well and not dumb them down. And I can step my purpose and do amazing things and do it with the joy in my heart. It's just free to actually do and not be concerned about what other people might say or think or do or react to the way I do things. Because, I mean, your friend that packed up or said they would pack up and go, I think a lot of people thought they were crazy. Why would you want to do that? Well, some people will make things up. Whatever you do, whatever happens, because now that her husband has passed, she can then go back and not do anything, go into a cocoon, because she could say, well, we should not have actually gone out and looked, right? Yeah, it's tough making the decisions and the things that come with it, because tragedies will come. Even when you decide to actually fulfill your purpose, it will happen. And I believe that's just one way of testing to see whether or not you will still go ahead with fulfilling your life of purpose, or will you just give up? It's quite a remarkable thing, but trust me, it's not an easy journey, but it's one of great joy and fulfillment.
Lincoln, what do you think is your purpose?
I mean, other than the fact that I think everyone's purpose is to serve, but how? That's what you're asking. So, how is my purpose of service going to be manifested in what I do? I love motivating and inspiring people. I love finance, and the way that I would like to do that is to continue along the lines of leading groups of people within business and finance to not just work just to pay the bills, but to work in a vocation where they are gifted and skilled in doing it and do it phenomenally well. That is what I would love to continue to do. And one of the things that I'm going to do, and you can mark my words, is I will begin instructing in, I'm not sure how yet, not as a professor, but as someone who could give advice to young professionals on the path that they should take, not because the area that they want to go into makes money, but along the pathway that what they're doing is something that they're skilled at doing, and they can do phenomenally well financially as well as just spiritually in their own being. That to me is great, because have you ever seen someone who is just so happy, just excited about their work? It's because they're doing what they're doing what they love.
I know.
And you almost get not upset, not resentful, but it's a bit of like, man,
It's incredulous. That can't be true,
yes,
right?
yes.
You can't be that
You
happy.
can't be that happy. And you know what? I should say one thing. Be careful, because some people who act that way, deep down inside, they're not. It should be measured. Listen, did anyone think that Robin Williams would have? No, come on, really? Every time you saw Robin Williams, you thought he was just the funniest person ever, at least when I did, right? So everyone has a story.
Yeah, but very, very unhappy in his personal life.
Right. Yes.
In the book, I've heard you talk about this in person as well, of being in service. If someone doesn't know how they can be in service, what is the best way that we can be in service to one another in our daily lives?
Thank you for that question, because service is not complicated. Think about it. Everyone has a skill. So if you pack in bags at a grocery store, you serving someone, you put in, it's not as complicated as, a surgeon, a doctor, a lawyer, someone picking your garbage up, helping a soup kitchen, working in a manufacturing outlet, retail, counseling. Every role is serving someone. You should do it with the skills that you have. Because if you have a skill, trust me, you'll be passionate about it. Very seldom you would have a skill and you're like, oh shit, you know what? I hate doing it. Very seldom. Not doesn't happen. But if you have 5 skills, there's one of them that you're more passionate about. Do it. And I'm telling you, it doesn't matter. You're a carpenter, you're a builder, construction. Do the amazing work that can fulfill even art. That's part of your service, because listen, you love animals and you want to start a shelter, or you want to, do a dog daycare. It doesn't matter. All of that is service. You're serving someone's needs.
Would you agree that beyond having a special skill or doing it as your vocation, that there are daily moments that we can be in service to each other?
Thank you. Okay, now I understand your question. Well, no, your whole life should be that way. It's very easy to be in yourself and, man, I just had a tough day and so forth. But always remember that other people are having tough days as well. And when you get a chance to speak to people, that's part of your service. Because you know how many times I speak to someone and they say, man, you just made my day. And I never really tell people that, but sometimes people make my day, because we all need people. I just don't know how hermits do it. You can go up into the mountains and you don't speak to anybody. I don't get it. I think that's just selfish and not living a life of purpose at all. And that's why it helps, even for parents. And now more than ever, it's been a journey, because I wasn't always like that. My daughter, when she does something and I said, why did you do that? I have to step back and say, why I'm speaking to her this way? I'm not helping her. I'm not serving her soul. Who knows? She's maybe going through something. Why don't you say, listen, I just noticed you did this, right? So it's how you approach things as well. That's part of the service of living a life of purpose. So yes, living a life of purpose is not just about a skill. My dad never thought of him living a life of purpose. He just lived it. That's what we all have to get to. When we get to the point where we're not even thinking, okay, tomorrow I need to wake up so I can live a life of purpose. No, it's not a job. It's just who you are. And if you think it's a job, then you're not your authentic self. Your authentic self doesn't have to say, listen, I need to say good morning to someone. I need to ask someone how they are doing. No, you do it because it's you and you just feel in your soul that it's a thing to do. And when you at that point when you can do that, it's an amazing thing where you don't even think it, you just do it.
What are the real dangers of procrastination? And how can one break the cycle of procrastination and take decisive steps toward fulfilling their purpose?
The first danger is that tomorrow is not promised. So you could not be on earth tomorrow. Really. So that's a danger already, number one, right? And that's not good. So if you think of it that way, it forces you to actually not make excuse and just do it. Everybody wants to do things perfectly, but I gotta tell you, many times that holds people back. I don't want to fail. I don't want to do it wrong. What does that mean? Do it wrong. At least you've done it. You know, I'm giving away stuff now because I've downsized and I'm selling as well. And one of the things that I have to be cautious of is not just saying, hey, listen, I'll take my time. My dad used to say, let's assume it's May, and he gets a deal on something, or maybe he sees some fruit or something for someone that is in need. He says that, listen, the poor and the hungry can't wait until Christmas for you to give them a basket of whatever, right? Or feed them Christmas time. Because, some people, that's what they do. They wait until Christmas and that's when they do all these things, special occasions. No, you need to do it now. Do it now, all right? Now is the time. The time is never tomorrow, it's now. It's relative. If you start thinking it in those terms, because the greatest tragedy is not being around to do what you said you're going to do. Look at the guy Rennie mentioned. I'm sure he had a lot of plans. They were obviously retired, but retirement doesn't mean that you just sit down and do nothing, right? It's a different pace. People who have a bucket lists, I got to tell you, that's again a problem. Just do it. There are very few people who actually just do what they said they're going to do that regret. Very few. You know what I mean? If it's something that you feel in your soul that you need to do, yeah. There's very few times that I've ever heard anyone do it and say, man, I wish I didn't do it. If it's not selfish, but if it's selfish, yeah, sometimes they say, I wish I didn't do it because I could have helped someone. So when I say about doing things, I'm not saying doing things just because, well, it's a selfish thing to do. I'm saying doing things because it's in your soul and spirit that benefits others. Traveling benefits you, but it could benefit others too, because as part of your journey, when you speak to people, hopefully when you travel, you're not just doing it in isolation. You're doing it while speaking to people, learning, and then it benefits you and others because now you have a different perspective. The world would be better when more people travel because they'll understand that not everyone is the same, and not everyone is evil, not of a certain race or color and so forth, right? Trust me, I've traveled quite a bit to know that. And if more people did that, they would realize that their predispositions and the ways of thinking, unfortunately.
If readers only walk away with one thought or lesson from your book, what do you hope readers will take away?
Don't wait until life has passed you by. That's what I want, that you should act with purpose now. I would like people to do that. That's why no more excuses exist. Act.
You mentioned you're working on your next book. Tell us about it.
Well, I wanted it to be ready April 30th of this year. But as you mentioned, my wife passed away December 23rd, 2023. And that has been a bit tough, needless to say. And it's also got me thinking to change a few things in the book. So I can't really say when yet. So it may be a year from now, but it's not going to be more than a year from now. The book is called Think, and it really focuses on a lot of things that people say and do without thinking. I think critical thinking is lost art. Unfortunately, again, sheep don't think. A sheep just does and follows. And when we start to think about the things that we say and do, how we treat others, we realize that we have failed society and we failed ourselves. We have no reason to speak the way we speak, do the things that we do, say the things that we say without thinking about how it impacts others. I used to think that it doesn't matter, sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never harm me. Well, words actually are powerful. They're very powerful. And
Oh, especially these days.
yeah, they're very powerful. And I used to think, well, it doesn't matter. To a certain degree, I understand and I still am of that mindset, other than the fact that I believe in a world where people need to step back and recognize that, yeah, you know what? Words do matter and they can hurt. And on the flip side, I want people to recognize who receive those words and are hurt by them to recognize that they're just words. So it's an interesting way to look at the world. I want people to recognize when they say things that it impacts others. I want people who receive those things, those words, when it's directed to them or to a group or so forth, to recognize those are just words and that the people are just ignorant. and that they lack the knowledge and understanding, because if they knew better, they wouldn't say. That's my view, right? So it's a bit odd for the most part, but I recognize that there's always two sides to a coin. And I believe that it's never just one side that needs to actually look at things in a different way. It's both sides. And when both sides look at it that way, we end up really in a union that's marvelous, amazing, and fulfilled in every way. Yes, some people call it utopian, but what kind of world would you want to live in? I mean, the world we live in now is really, it's not looking good. So we know that not one side or one perspective will make this world better. It has to be both sides. The people who say and do, and the people who receive what's said and done. And both of them need to be comfortable in their own mind and soul and spirit to recognize that they are unique and marvelous and amazing in many ways. And they just need to act, do, say, and write better. And the others need to also do the same and receive things in the way that we ought to, which is to recognize that a lot of people who say things that are mean are just doing it from fear and ignorance. This is a joke that I have, so I'm going to share it with you guys quickly. If you say F, to me, I can respond, no, thank you. And I got to tell you, that pisses people off. It's like, nah, I'm good. You see, yeah, I'm good. Now, you see, I can actually say F you back, right? And then we go back and forth, and then, but no, I just said, nah, I'm good. And I gotta tell you, 100% of the time, that has worked perfectly, because for me, it's
Disarm them when you say it.
Yeah, they're confused now. Yeah. I say, I'm good.
Wait a minute. Expect that. Expected aggression.
Yeah. Like someone says, "What man you stupid?" And I'm like, "Oh, sometimes, man, I feel that way." But yeah, not today. And they're like, "What?" Right. You see, it's very easy. You have to develop, and it's not easy. But again, you give people the power over you and control over you when they say bad and evil things to you and you respond negatively. Then they have you. That's when they have you. When you're like, and you start laughing, that makes them really upset now. No. But it's much better, because you never want to go to bed or leave a situation with someone having a control over you so much that it gets you stressed and depressed. And yeah, words matter, but you have to be able to counter those with a sense of self and the fact that you are unique and amazing and you believe it to be so. And your validation comes from within, not from someone else.
How can people learn more about you and get in touch?
I'm still working through this, Joel, because I am not much on social media. I'm on LinkedIn, yes. One of the things I'm beginning to do, and maybe you guys can help me, is I have a web page, but it's not updated. And one of the things that Renee asked me is, one of the things I'd like to do is to start updating it and posting things somehow, because I like to share what I've gone through in my life, and hopefully it will help others, because I know it has helped people that I am close with. I truly believe that it will help others if I get to use social media the way I should be able to use it. Right now, people can't really get hold of me that much, other than, as I said, I have a website, Lincoln.Greenidge, I think, .com. But I will do better, and hopefully in the next couple of months, I'll be able to update it and get going on posting things on a weekly basis, which is what my desire is.
We will post a link to your social medias and your website so people can find you.
Wonderful.
We've come to the speed round. We're going to ask you some thoughtful questions. And the first one is, what is your most prized possession and why?
Possession. I don't like to possess much, but right now, I think it's Lego of the Millennial Falcon. I think it's 7,892 pieces. And for me, it's prized because my son and I started it, and in 10 minutes, he gave up. And I continued doing it for most of the week, but that's it.
When do you feel like the best version of yourself?
When I'm speaking to friends about projects, it makes me very happy when they succeed. That's the best time of being myself and my best version of myself, because it's part of who I am and my purpose of motivating and inspiring people. When they can tell me that they've followed something that I've done or advised them to do and they did it, and that's just to succeed, or that's best. It's a beautiful thing.
What piece of advice would you give to your younger self?
No more excuses. That's the advice. Do things that I'm passionate about and ensure that I live that life of service, because I only started doing that, I would say, much later in life. So my younger self, I'd say, giddy up. Don't just live life without purpose. Live it with purpose and you'll never be the same.
If you could know the answer to any question, what would it be?
Any question, the answer to any question. Oh, that's a tough one. Why did Jesus choose 12 men as his disciples and not 6 men and 6 women?
Wow.
Or 12 women?
Yes. Yeah. Oh, 12 women. Yes. Exactly. You got it.
Interesting.
That's my question.
I love it. I love it. Now for our question down the lane question. This comes from our last guest, who the question was inspired by his son, who is studying to be a photographer. And a question that they asked, what is your message for the future?
My message for the future is, if we look within our souls and recognize that we are all one spiritually, my message is to do that. Look within ourselves and our souls and recognize that we've done an awful job in being selfish and not recognizing that the world will be a much better place if we showed love to each other.
I think he'd be very happy with that answer. That is a great way to end this episode of Podcetera. I want to thank you for taking time with us. I know that you have a lot of other things on your mind right now. We appreciate you sharing that time with us.
Thank you so much for having me on your show. I appreciate it so much. And listen, I'm looking forward to chatting with you again.
Very nice to meet you. Thank you.
Thank you, Joel.
If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a review and share Podcetera. And be sure to follow and like the series wherever you enjoy podcasts.
For Podcetera, I'm Renee Lego.
And I'm Joelle Ludovich. Thanks for listening.
See you next time.